Hi. So this is the second part. I want to finish up with the dead, simply trying to get you aware of how much you're doing when you read the story. So going off and reading a summary of the story or a plot summary is going to ruin the story for you. It's a puzzle that you're sort of understanding as you go along, just like you understand people as you meet them and spend time with them, and you make inferences about them, and you make decisions about what's really being said. And you have to sort of pay attention, but the writer is helping you find your way into the party. And by this passage that I just read, when he's listening to Mary Jane play the piano, we suddenly have Gabriel isolated. And when we're going to have a lot of these in Ulysses, we're going to have the characters isolated, sitting around looking at everybody, or thinking, or wandering along the beach, or plunged into these kind of hectic Robert Altman style dialogues where everybody's talking at once and everyone's talking over each other, and you're catching glimpses of things being said and being done. And all of it's important, mainly is how it's being seen and who's seeing it. So as Gabriel looks around the party and notices no one's really paying attention, there's a lot of ways we can interpret that as we get to know Gabriel, who doesn't feel like he belongs in Ireland, who doesn't feel like he belongs to this party, who feels that he's a bit of a phony, a bit pretentious. And you'll get a lot of that from his discussions with people about his book reviewing and the way they talk about his book reviewing, and how his resentments about the family, and particularly resentments about people who had treated his wife Greta, who's his significant other in the story, his wife, and very important to him, and how they've treated him. And we get into sort of scenes. I'm not going to go into any more of these scenes because the rest of this middle part is dancing with Miss Ivors, hearing the invitation to Galway, mentioning the invitation to Galway to his wife, who says, "Oh yeah, let's go to Galway." We don't know why until later. And we never really totally know why, but she wants to go to Galway, and it becomes significant as we find out at the end of the story what she did in Galway. And we have to really be careful, almost sentence by sentence, to know who's speaking, because he will not tell us everything that's happening. Things are happening to us, people are coming up to us. We don't see ourselves in the hall, we don't know exactly where we are all the time, but we know we're with Gabriel. Now, we go through a long dinner passage, and there's some interesting little tricks. This happens a few times in the story. And you'll see this a lot in Ulysses, where we sit down to dinner. This is one of my favorite passages, 2:13. We sit down at dinner, and all day Gabriel's been thinking, "Oh, I've got to give this speech." And it's pretty he's come up with some pretentious stuff. I think he's going to quote Browning, and he's got all these ideas he wants to say. And he's been worrying all day and fidgeting over this, and he's going to do he's the carving the turkey. And we sit down at the table with all these people, and what we see is what Gabriel sees, which is the turkey he's got to carve. And we have a really lovely description, because Joyce can really do the physical observations of the fat brown goose at one end of the table, and at the other end, on a bed of creased paper strewn with sprigs of parsley, lay a great ham, stripped of its outer skin and peppered over with crust crumbs, a neat paper frill round its shin, and beside this was a round of spiced beef. There's a long paragraph as Gabriel sits down, and again, we don't see everybody at the table. We see the food in front of him because he's going to be doing the carving. And we sit there, he does the carving, we hear voices and people talking around him, and then at the end of the carving, about a page and a half later, we just hear Gabriel bring it to an end, and he fills his own plate, and then, "Very well," said Gabriel amiably as he took another preparatory draught. "Kindly forget my existence, ladies and gentlemen, for a few minutes." He set to his supper and took no part in the conversation. So we're still in his point of view, but he sits down and just starts eating. And he just disappears from the story for 2 or 3 pages. He's still the point of view. We're hearing all the noise around him, but he's almost vanished into the woodwork of the story. It's not an omniscient narrator, which my students love this term, omniscient narrator. It's still Gabriel. We're still hearing it focused around him and all the voices. And then about 4 pages later, as all the noise is going on, Gabriel having finished. This is page 217. The huge pudding was transferred to the table. And now He's like he's woken up. He's finished eating, the pudding comes in, and Gabriel prepares to give his speech. And he stands up and he gives his speech. I want to just skim through that because the speech is quite good. It's his vision of this world that he sort of hates and trying to say the things he does like about it and trying to say nice things. And it ends with this raucous kind of, for there, a jolly good fellow. And it ends the party scene, the dinner scene, okay? And we get another scene break, very strong scene break, because basically it kind of degenerates into laughter and everybody having a good time and drinking and eating. Right? Many hours later, ... We don't have to say what time it is. We don't have to do anything, but as readers, we know that little break, the ... This ... or your space, your double space, means a lot of things have happened, but they weren't important things. So we can move on to the important one. And we end up in the hall, and everyone started laughing and joking, and Gabriel's in the other room. He's in the hall waiting for his wife, and there's a couple of pages where we're just sort of hearing everybody getting their coats and getting ready to go, and there's some jokes about Mr. Brown, whose voice is constantly coming up in the story. And we have a lovely little shift here where we have Gabriel alone in the staircase, I believe, looking up at his wife while his wife stands outside a door listening to some music being played. It's a really lovely passage. I'm going to read it, just a short part as he's looking at her. Here's an important part, page 227 to 228. He's in the hall. We've had a couple of paragraphs where he's just sitting there listening to the people outside and looking up the hall. He stood still in the gloom of the hall, trying to catch the air that the voice was singing and gazing up at his wife. There was grace and mystery in her attitude, as if she were a symbol of something. He asked himself, what is a woman standing on the stairs in the shadow, listening to distant music, a symbol of? It's a quite complicated thought. If he were a painter, he would paint her in that attitude. Her blue felt hat would show off the bronze of her hair against the darkness, and the dark panels of her skirt would show off the light ones. Distant music, he would call the picture if he were a painter. Now, we're getting this sort of recurring thought from Gabriel, which is of music and of words being placed on the page and hearing a music out of those words. Again, the music is taking place in between these sentences. We're not getting the description of music. We're getting the description of people, how people look as they're listening to the music. We're seeing images of people. We're getting short thoughts in people's heads. And these are sort of being woven together in Gabriel's head as a sort of music, looking at her, listening to music. We're going to keep coming. The notion of music and words and the language of fiction as being a form of music will continually recur in Ulysses. Sometimes to its detriment, sometimes annoyingly so. But it will come back again and again. Then we hear the song, and we see his wife come down the stairs, and she looks somehow to him there. I want to say she's just something about her has really struck him in that scene. And he's in love with her, he's aroused by her, he's moved by her, and the connection between her and the music is really rich inside him. We just feel, there's never explained to us that way. We simply see each moment as it occurs and then get his thoughts as he reacts to those moments. And the visuals are very carefully chosen. Now, I want to skip way back to the end, because this is happening throughout the story. We are getting, but the writer has settled a lot of things in our heads so that we can get to the end of the story now. He's going to do this in most of the chapters of Ulysses. He's established who our point of view is. He's established the significant moment for that passage of time. In this case, the entire party starts to come down to Gabriel and his wife, who at the beginning are just part of the noise, coming in together, making jokes about how long she takes to get dressed. There's sudden, but now we've brought it closer and closer together to a single focus of him and his wife. And as they get up and get into a cab and go back to their hotel, we have a really intensely Gabriel-centered point of view as he's looking at his wife. He wants to make love to his wife. He's looking for the right moment to make love to his wife. At which point, the conversation leads to him learning from her that she had had a boyfriend, not a boyfriend or somebody who used to walk her around a lot, who was quite sick, named Michael Fury. And we have a sort of a very strong period just between the two of them, where she's trying to explain how she felt about Michael Fury, how he died. Gabriel suddenly going, oh, so that's why you wanted to go to Galway from earlier in the story. Again, these moments in the previous parts of the story, we have to be paying attention to even realize that's an interesting moment. She says, oh yeah, let's go to Galway. Good idea. Now, at the time, it's pretty much flagged. It's an important part of the moment. He doesn't show us all the other conversations. Most of the conversations are important to the entirety of the story. And now we have this closing thing about Galway and Michael Fury dying and his emotions toward her, which are continually seen visually in how he looks at her, how he touches her hand, what she says and what they say to each other, and then her final words to him when she starts to cry. This is the end of the penultimate scene. She stopped, choking with sobs. This is after she says, I heard he was dead. And overcome by emotion, flung herself face downward on the bed, sobbing in the quilt. Gabriel held her hand for a moment longer, irresolutely, and then, shy of intruding on her grief, let it fall gently and walked quietly to the window where it's snowing outside. Now we have another time break. She's sobbing. He's kind of almost cold to her. He walks to the window, and you've really got to read that carefully, not for what's happening, but for the emotions of this man walking away from his wife to look out the window as she's crying. You can't say this is what he feels, but you're feeling the complexity of what he's feeling and trying to understand it. And we have a long break here. She was fast asleep. Now we've woken up. We've gone through that passage where Gabriel's just been looking out the window and thinking. And it's a very powerful, important moment to let pass. How long has she been crying? We don't know. What is she crying about? We don't know. What is he thinking while she's crying? We don't really know. But he, at the end of those tears, he's thinking, she loved someone before me. Now, that setup and that sense of timing is really, really effective for a fiction writer. And again, I think Joyce is great sometimes, and particularly in parts of Ulysses. And those are the moments you're going to find in Ulysses, the timing of these emotional moments. And when they arrive, and what we cut out, and what we skip. Because sometimes in Ulysses, you're going to think everything's been thrown in. It's like a dog's dinner. Every single thing that's anyone ever thought is being thrown into this book. It's not. So we're selected. Now, I don't want to read the entire... If you read from 240 to 242, it's often read out loud in literature courses because it's quite beautiful. The effect of all of this evening has been narrowed down for Gabriel in this feeling about his wife, and then looking out over the snow, which has been recurring, that's been running through the entire story, and thinking about all the dead in his life, the dead that he has known, the dead of her life, the things that he'll never know about himself or about his wife, and about all the people out there who are gone. And it's a very powerful passage. I won't try to read it because it's something I think you should read the whole last 2 pages by yourself out loud. But in many ways, all good fiction has to be read out loud like that. Every sentence has to be heard, and particularly in this story where often you think nothing's happening, and for the first page and a half there's so much information coming out. You're dropped into the life. It's just not information. You're dropped into the aunts and the cousins and the friends, and their names are coming at you and you don't know who they are. So it's not information, it's life. And it ends with life, and it begins with life, and every sentence is a moment of a fictionalized form of life. So we're going to get into more of that, even more detailed in Ulysses. Okay, that's all I can say in 30 minutes about the dead. It's a great story, though. It really deserves to be read out loud in your head.